The autumn wind of 1876 carried the scent of wood smoke and horse sweat through the muddy streets of Deadwood, Dakota Territory. Rose McCarthy pulled her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders as she pushed through the batwing doors of the Silver Dollar Saloon, the familiar cacophony of drunken laughter and off-key piano music washing over her like a tide. "Rose, where you been, girl?" Martha Culligan's voice boomed from behind the bar, her weathered face creased with worry. At 55, Martha had seen enough of frontier life to know that survival meant keeping your best workers close and your enemies closer. "Just getting some air, Mrs. Culligan," Rose replied, automatically turning her left side away from the room's occupants. Even after 3 years in Deadwood, the habit remained as strong as ever. Always keep the scar hidden, always present the unmarked side of her face first. The Silver Dollar was busier than usual for a Thursday evening. Word had spread that the Hartwell Mining Company had struck a new vein of gold up in the hills, and the promise of work had drawn men from 3 counties over. They sat hunched over their whiskey and beer, their voices loud with the bravado that came from the possibility of striking it rich. Rose moved between the tables with practiced efficiency, collecting empty glasses and dodging wandering hands with the grace of someone who'd learned to navigate dangerous waters. The scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw caught the lamplight as she turned, and she saw more than one miner's gaze linger on it with a mixture of curiosity and revulsion. "Hey, Rose," called out Jake Morrison, a regular who worked the smaller claims outside town. "Come sing us something pretty. That voice of yours could make a man forget all about the cold and the mud." Rose smiled carefully so the scar wouldn't pull too tight. "Maybe later, Jake. Martha's got me running tonight." "Oh, come on," Jake pressed, his words slightly slurred. "Just one song, something to warm the cockles of our hearts." Before Rose could respond, the saloon door swung open with enough force to make the hinges creak. 3 men entered, their expensive clothes and polished boots marking them as different from the usual clientele. The middle one, a man in his 30s with perfectly groomed whiskers and cold blue eyes, surveyed the room like he owned it. "Well, well," he said loudly, his voice carrying the educated accent of the East. "If it ain't the famous Silver Dollar. Heard this place had some interesting entertainment." Martha's knuckles went white around the glass she was cleaning. "Welcome to the Silver Dollar, gentlemen. What can I get you?" "Whiskey," the man replied, not taking his eyes off the room. "Your best bottle, and we hear you've got a songbird here, a scarred one." Rose felt every eye in the saloon turn toward her. The room had gone quiet except for the nervous tinkling of the piano player, who seemed unsure whether to keep playing or stop. "That would be Rose," Martha said carefully, "but she's working the floor tonight, not performing." "Oh, but we insist," the man said, pulling out a leather wallet, thick with bills. "We've ridden a long way to see the famous Beauty and the Beast show." His companions laughed at what they clearly considered a clever joke. Rose stepped forward, her chin raised despite the familiar burn of shame in her chest. "I'm sorry, sir, but as Mrs. Culligan said, I'm not performing tonight." The man's eyes fixed on her scar, and his expression shifted from amusement to disgust. "Jesus Christ," he said loudly, "no wonder they keep you serving drinks instead of singing. What happened to your face, girl? Looks like someone took a brand to you." The silence in the saloon became absolute. Even the piano player had stopped now, his hands frozen over the keys. "That's enough," Martha said firmly. But the man ignored her. "I'm Thomas Hartwell," he announced, as if the name should mean something to everyone present. "My family owns the largest gold operation in these parts. We employ half the men in this room." He looked around, making sure he had everyone's attention. "And I've got to say, I'm disappointed in the caliber of entertainment you're offering here." Rose felt her face burn, but she kept her voice steady. "If you don't like what we offer, sir, you're welcome to drink elsewhere." Thomas Hartwell's face darkened. "You giving me sass, Scarface?" "I'm telling you that you're not welcome to insult me in my place of work." Rose replied, her voice growing stronger with each word. Your place of work? Thomas laughed harshly. Girl, you ought to be grateful anyone lets you work at all, looking like that. Hell, I'd pay you to keep that face covered. He reached into his wallet and pulled out several bills, throwing them at Rose's feet. There's $5, buy yourself a veil. The money scattered across the sawdust floor like autumn leaves. Rose stared down at it, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Around the room she could see some men looking ashamed, others snickering behind their hands. No one moved to help her. Pick it up, Thomas ordered. Consider it charity. I don't want your charity, Rose said quietly. Pick it up, Thomas repeated, his voice turning dangerous. His hand moved to rest on the pistol at his hip. Or maybe you'd prefer I teach you some manners the hard way. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Martha started to move from behind the bar, but Thomas's brothers, Rose could see the family resemblance now, stepped to block her path. Rose bent slowly to collect the scattered bills, her face burning with humiliation. The scar seemed to throb with every heartbeat, a constant reminder of why she deserved this treatment, why she would always deserve this treatment. That's better, Thomas said with satisfaction. Now, since we paid for entertainment, why don't you sing us something about knowing your place? Rose straightened, the crumpled bills in her hand. She opened her mouth to refuse, to tell Thomas Hartwell exactly what he could do with his money and his demands. But then she caught sight of Martha's frightened face, thought about the other girls who worked here, about how easily the Hartwells could make trouble for everyone. What would you like to hear? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas smiled, the expression making him look like a satisfied cat. How about Jeannie with the light brown hair? Though I suppose in your case it should be Jeannie with the ruined face. His brothers laughed appreciatively. A few of the miners joined in, nervous chuckles that sounded more like coughs in the tense atmosphere. Rose closed her eyes, trying to find her voice, trying to summon the strength to get through whatever song would end this nightmare. When she opened them again, she noticed something that made her pause. In the far corner of the saloon, almost hidden in the shadows, sat a man she'd never seen before. He was tall, she could tell, even though he was sitting, with dark hair that needed cutting and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His clothes were simple, brown wool pants, a white shirt, a leather vest, but they were clean and well made. More importantly, he was watching the scene unfold with an expression of cold fury that made Rose's breath catch. Their eyes met across the smoky room, and for a moment Rose felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the sense that someone was truly seeing her. Not just her scar, not just her circumstances, but her... The man stood up. He was even taller than Rose had guessed, easily 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the kind of quiet presence that made conversation stop without him saying a word. He reached into his coat and pulled out something that made every person in the Silver Dollar Saloon freeze in amazement. It was a gold bar, not nuggets, not dust, but a solid brick of pure gold that caught the lamplight and threw it back in warm, impossible gleams. The stranger walked across the room with measured steps, his boots loud on the wooden floor. When he reached Thomas Hartwell, he set the gold bar on the table with a soft thunk that seemed to echo in the silence. "Problem here?" the stranger asked. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but there was something underneath it that made Thomas take an involuntary step backward. "No problem," Thomas said, though his eyes never left the gold. "Just having a little fun with the help." "Fun," the stranger repeated. He looked at Rose, then back at Thomas. "You think insulting a lady is fun?" "Lady," Thomas forced a laugh. "You see something I don't, mister. That's just a saloon girl with a face that'd scare a horse." The stranger's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I see a woman trying to do her job, and I see a man who doesn't know how to treat a woman with respect." "Listen, stranger," Thomas blustered. I don't know who you think you are, but name's Cole, the man said simply, and I think you owe the lady an apology. Thomas looked around the room, seeking support from his brothers, from the other patrons. What he found instead were faces carefully turned away, men suddenly very interested in their drinks. The gold bar seemed to glow on the table between them, more money than most of these men would see in a lifetime. I don't owe her anything, Thomas said, but his voice had lost some of its bluster. Cole nodded slowly, as if this was the answer he'd expected. He reached into his coat again and pulled out another gold bar, placing it next to the first, then another, and another. 4 bars, Cole said conversationally. That's about $8,000, give or take. More than enough to buy this saloon outright, I'd imagine. Martha made a small choking sound from behind the bar. What's your point? Thomas demanded. Thomas, my point, Cole said, his voice still quiet, but somehow filling the entire room, is that I just bought this place, which means you're no longer a customer, you're a trespasser. The silence that followed was so complete that Rose could hear her own heartbeat. Thomas stared at the gold bars, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been fear. You can't just, Thomas started. I can, Cole interrupted, and I did. Now you can leave on your own, or I can help you leave, your choice. Thomas looked at his brothers, both of whom were already edging toward the door. The promise of gold had drawn men to Deadwood, but the reality of violence kept them alive, and both men clearly recognized something dangerous in Cole's quiet manner. This isn't over, Thomas said, trying to salvage some dignity. Yes, Cole replied calmly. It is. The Hartwell brothers left without another word, the doors swinging shut behind them with a finality that seemed to mark the end of an era. Cole turned to Martha, who was still staring at the gold bars in shock. Ma'am, I believe we need to discuss the terms of sale. Yes, of course, Martha stammered. Then Cole looked at Rose, and again she felt that strange sensation of being truly seen. Miss, he said, tipping his hat slightly, I wonder if you might have time to show me around my new investment. Rose looked down at the crumpled bills still clutched in her hand, then back at this stranger who had just turned her world upside down. Yes, sir. I'd be happy to. As the normal sounds of the saloon slowly resumed, conversations picking up, the piano player tentatively returning to his keys, Rose found herself wondering who Cole really was, where he'd gotten so much gold, and why he'd chosen to spend it protecting her. But more than that, she found herself wondering if this was what hope felt like, because she'd almost forgotten. Dawn broke grey and cold over Deadwood, painting the ramshackle buildings in shades of silver and shadow. Rose stood at the window of her small room above the Silver Dollar, watching the early risers emerge onto the muddy streets below. Miners heading to their claims, shopkeepers opening their doors, women hanging laundry, the daily rhythm of a town built on dreams and desperation. But this morning felt different. This morning, everything had changed. She touched the scar on her face unconsciously, a habit she'd developed over the years. The raised skin was sensitive to temperature changes, and the morning chill made it ache with old memories. Boston, the fire, the screams, the way people had looked at her afterward when the bandages finally came off and she saw herself in the mirror for the first time. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Rose, you awake? Martha's voice was uncharacteristically gentle. Come in, Mrs. Culligan. Martha entered carrying a tray with coffee and toast, a luxury Rose wasn't used to receiving. The older woman's face was drawn with exhaustion, but there was something else there too, a mixture of relief and bewilderment. Couldn't sleep either, Martha asked, setting the tray on Rose's small table. Not much, Rose admitted. Mrs. Culligan, what happened last night? Is it real? Did that man really buy the saloon? Martha sat heavily in Rose's only chair. Real as rain, girl. I've got 4 gold bars locked in my strongbox and papers signed in his name. Coleman Blackwood, that's his full name turns out, says he prefers Cole. Coleman Blackwood, Rose repeated. The name seemed familiar somehow, but she couldn't place it. Rose, Martha's voice grew serious. There's something you need to know. After you went to bed, Cole and I had a long talk about the changes he wants to make around here. Rose's stomach tightened. What kind of changes? Good ones, mostly. Better wages for the girls, cleaner rooms, no more tolerating men who get too rough with the staff. But Rose, Martha paused, studying her hands. He's made you the floor manager. Says the Silver Dollar needs someone who understands what it's like to be treated poorly so they can make sure it doesn't happen to others. Rose stared at her. Floor manager? Means you'd oversee the other girls, make decisions about who gets served and who gets thrown out, handle the money when I'm not here. Martha looked up. It's good work, Rose. Respectable work, and the pay, well, let's just say you'd never have to worry about having enough again. Why? Rose whispered. Why would he do this for me? That's what I asked him, Martha said. You know what he told me. He said some folks deserve a second chance, and some folks deserve to be the ones giving out second chances. Before Rose could respond, the sound of boots on the stairs announced someone coming up. Martha tensed. Men weren't supposed to be in the girls' quarters during the day, but then Cole's voice called out, Miss McCarthy? Mrs. Culligan? Hope I'm not intruding, but we've got company downstairs. Rose quickly pulled on her shawl and followed Martha down to the main room of the saloon. Cole stood near the bar, looking as calm as he had the night before, but Rose noticed the way his hand rested casually near the gun at his hip. What kind of company? Martha asked. Sheriff's here, Cole said simply, and he's brought Thomas Hartwell with him. Through the front windows, Rose could see a small crowd gathering in the street. Word travelled fast in a town like Deadwood, and the story of the previous night's confrontation had clearly spread. The doors swung open, and Sheriff William Bullock entered, followed by Thomas Hartwell and a man Rose didn't recognize, older, better dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Morning, Martha, Sheriff Bullock said with a tip of his hat. He was a fair man by Deadwood standards, but Rose knew he walked a careful line between justice and politics. Heard you had some excitement last night. Nothing we couldn't handle, Sheriff, Martha replied. That's not how I heard it, the older stranger said, stepping forward. I'm Senator James Hartwell, Thomas's father. I understand there was some kind of misunderstanding last night involving my son. Cole moved slightly, positioning himself between the Hartwells and Rose. The gesture was subtle, but Rose noticed it, and so did Senator Hartwell. No misunderstanding, Cole said quietly. Your son insulted a lady, and I asked him to leave. Asked him to leave after making some kind of wild financial gesture, from what I understand, Senator Hartwell replied. His eyes were cold, calculating. Mr. Blackwood, isn't it? Rose saw Cole's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. That's right. Interesting name, Senator Hartwell continued. We had some trouble with a Blackwood a few years back, federal marshal who didn't understand how things work out here. Had to be discouraged from interfering in local business. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Cole's expression didn't change, but Rose felt something dangerous stirring in the silence. Ancient history, Cole said finally. Is it? Senator Hartwell smiled, but there was no warmth in it, because I'm wondering if this generous purchase of the silver dollar might not be some kind of personal vendetta. Sheriff Bullock looked uncomfortable. Senator, if there's been a crime committed— Oh, I'm not talking about crimes, Sheriff. I'm talking about misunderstandings. Like the misunderstanding that might lead someone to think they can come into our town and disrupt our business relationships. What business relationships? Martha demanded. Thomas Hartwell spoke for the first time. The silver dollar provides entertainment for my workers. It's an important part of keeping them happy and productive. If that arrangement were to change— Are you threatening my business? Martha's voice was steady, but Rose could see her hands shaking. "Not threatening," Senator Hartwell said smoothly, "just explaining reality. The Hartwell Mining Company employs 60% of the men in this town. If we were to say recommend they seek entertainment elsewhere, it might affect your profitability." Cole stepped forward. "Senator, let me explain something to you. I've got enough gold in the ground to buy half this territory. Your threats don't concern me." "But they should concern your friends," Senator Hartwell replied, his eyes moving to Rose. "Small towns can be dangerous places for people who don't fit in. Accidents happen, fires start, people disappear." Rose felt the blood drain from her face. The scar on her cheek seemed to pulse with remembered pain. "That sounds like a threat to me," Sheriff Bullock said quietly. "Not a threat, Sheriff, just a concerned citizen wondering about the safety of our community." Senator Hartwell's smile was poisonous. "After all, we wouldn't want any more tragic accidents like the one that gave our dear Rose her distinctive appearance." The silence that followed was absolute. Rose felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. How could he know about Boston, about the fire? But then she looked at Cole and saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. It was rage, pure and cold, but more than that it was recognition. "Gentlemen," Cole said, his voice deadly quiet, "I think this conversation is over." "Oh, I don't think it is," Senator Hartwell replied. "You see, Mr. Blackwood, we've done some checking on you. Very interesting history. Lost your wife and daughter in a house fire, didn't you? Started by some men who didn't like your investigation into their business practices." Rose saw Cole's hand move closer to his gun. "And now here you are," Senator Hartwell continued, "in my town, interfering with my business, protecting a girl with burn scars. One might think you're seeing ghosts, Mr. Blackwood. One might think you're not thinking clearly." "Senator," Sheriff Bullock warned, "that's enough." But Senator Hartwell wasn't finished. "The thing about ghosts, Mr. Blackwood, is that they can't be saved. Your wife and daughter are dead, and all the scarred saloon girls in the world won't bring them back." Cole moved faster than Rose would have thought possible. One moment he was standing by the bar, the next he had Senator Hartwell pressed against the wall, his forearm across the older man's throat. "You're right," Cole said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My family is dead, and the men responsible will answer for that. But until they do, anyone who threatens innocent people in my presence is going to have a problem with me." "Cole," Sheriff Bullock said carefully, "let him go." Cole held the senator for another moment, then stepped back. Senator Hartwell straightened his coat with shaking hands. His composure finally cracked. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," Cole replied, "it is. Because if anything happens to anyone in this saloon, anything at all, I'll hold you personally responsible. And Senator, I've got nothing left to lose." The Hartwells left without another word, but Rose could see the promise of retribution in their eyes. "Well," Sheriff Bullock said when they were gone, "that was interesting. Cole, you want to tell me what this is really about?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. "It's about a federal marshal who tried to do his job and lost everything because of it. And it's about making sure history doesn't repeat itself." After the sheriff left, Cole turned to Rose and Martha. "I need to tell you both something. Senator Hartwell was right. This is personal, and I'm afraid I've put you in danger because of it." "What kind of danger?" Martha asked. "Wanter Downing." "The Hartwells weren't just involved in the corruption I was investigating," Cole said quietly. "They were part of the group that killed my family, and now they know I'm here." Rose felt her world tilt again. "You're here for revenge." "I'm here for justice," Cole corrected. "But yes, I want the men who killed Sarah and Emma to pay for what they did." "And you're using us to get to them," Rose said, understanding flooding through her. Cole's face softened. "No, Rose, I bought this saloon to protect you. The rest, that's just a bonus." "How can I believe that?" Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. He handed it to Rose with trembling fingers. The photograph showed a young woman with dark hair and a beautiful smile, holding a little girl with Cole's eyes. But what made Rose's breath catch was the scar that ran down the left side of the woman's face, a burn scar, just like Rose's own. "My wife Sarah," Cole said quietly. "She was burned as a child in a tenement fire in New York. When I saw you last night, when I saw how they were treating you," his voice broke slightly, "I couldn't let it happen again." Rose stared at the photograph, understanding finally flooding through her. "You see her when you look at me." "At first, maybe," Cole admitted. "But Rose, you're not Sarah. You're stronger than she ever was, braver than she ever had to be. And what I feel when I look at you, that's not about the past, that's about right now." Before Rose could respond, the sound of gunshots echoed from the street outside. Cole immediately moved to the window, his hand on his gun. "What is it?" Martha asked. "The Hartwells," Cole said grimly. "Looks like they've decided not to wait for accidents to happen." As the sound of shouting and more gunshots filled the air, Rose realized that her quiet life in Deadwood was truly over. Whatever came next, she would have to face it with courage she wasn't sure she possessed. But looking at Cole's determined face, she began to think that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to face it alone. The gunshots came from the direction of the Hartwell Mining Company office, and by the time Cole, Rose and Martha reached the street, half of Deadwood was already gathering to see what the commotion was about. Smoke was rising from behind the main buildings, and the smell of burning wood carried on the wind. "Fire!" someone shouted. "Fire at the Chinese camp!" Rose felt her blood turn to ice. The Chinese camp was where the immigrant workers lived. Men who had come to work the smaller claims and faced constant harassment from the larger mining operations. If the fire spread, "We have to help," she said, already moving toward the smoke. Cole caught her arm. "Rose, this isn't an accident. The Hartwells are sending a message." "Then we can't let them succeed," Rose replied firmly. "Those people have done nothing wrong." Cole studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Martha, get the other girls somewhere safe. Rose and I are going to help with the fire." As they ran toward the flames, Rose could see the scope of the destruction. 3 buildings in the Chinese camp were fully engulfed, and the fire was spreading toward the main part of town. Men were already forming bucket brigades, but the autumn wind was working against them. "Over here," called out Dr. Samuel Chen, one of the few Chinese residents who spoke fluent English. "We need help moving the injured." Rose didn't hesitate. She ran toward Dr. Chen, immediately kneeling beside a young man whose arm was badly burned. The sight of his injuries brought back memories of her own pain, but she pushed them aside and focused on helping. "What happened?" she asked Dr. Chen as they worked. "Men with torches," he replied grimly. "They said the camp was too close to the white part of town, said we needed to be moved permanently." Cole appeared beside them, carrying an unconscious woman. "How many are hurt?" "7 so far," Dr. Chen replied. "But if the fire reaches the supply shed, the whole camp will go up." Rose looked toward the supply shed Dr. Chen indicated and saw the problem immediately. The building was where the Chinese workers stored their blasting powder for mining operations. If the fire reached it, "We have to stop the fire before it gets there," she said. "How?" Cole asked. "The wind's too strong for the bucket brigade." Rose studied the situation, her mind racing. Then she remembered something from her childhood in Boston, watching the firefighters during the Great Warehouse Fire of 1871. "We need to create a fire break," she said. "If we can tear down the buildings between the fire and the supply shed, there won't be anything for the flames to catch." Cole's eyes lit up with understanding. The old mining shacks, they're barely standing anyway. "But we'd need ropes, and men willing to work fast," Rose said. "Leave that to me," Cole replied. He stood and began shouting orders with an authority that made men stop and listen. "You, Morrison, get every rope you can find. Peterson, Sullivan, start evacuating the buildings between here and the supply shed. Everyone else, keep that bucket brigade moving." Rose was amazed at how quickly men responded to Cole's commands. Even miners who'd been hesitant to help the Chinese workers suddenly found themselves following his orders without question. "How does he do that?" Dr. Chen asked, watching Cole organize the firefighting effort. "I think he used to be in charge of things," Rose replied, not fully understanding it herself. Working together, they managed to create a fire break just as the wind shifted, sending the flames toward where the supply shed stood. The fire hit the empty space they'd created and began to die down, starved of fuel. It took 2 more hours to fully extinguish the blaze, but when it was over, they'd saved most of the camp and prevented a disaster that could have consumed half the town. As the crowd began to disperse, Rose noticed Sheriff Bullock approaching with a grim expression. "Cole," he said quietly, "we need to talk." They moved away from the crowd, and Rose followed, sensing that whatever the sheriff had to say concerned her too. "I found something at the site where the fire started," Sheriff Bullock said, holding up a piece of cloth. "Looks like someone dropped this in their hurry to get away." Rose recognized the expensive fabric immediately. "That's from Thomas Hartwell's vest. I saw him wearing it yesterday." "That's what I figured," Sheriff Bullock said. "But here's the problem. When I went to arrest him, the Hartwells were gone, all of them, packed up and left town sometime during the fire." Cole's jaw tightened. "Running." "Looks like," Sheriff Bullock agreed. "But Cole, there's something else. I did some checking on you after this morning's confrontation, sent some telegrams to contacts back east." Rose felt Cole tense beside her. "You want to tell me why a federal marshal named Coleman Blackwood was reported dead 3 years ago in California?" Sheriff Bullock asked. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Cole spoke. "Because sometimes a man needs to disappear to stay alive long enough to see justice done." "Justice or revenge? Does it matter?" Cole's voice was hard. "The Hartwells and their associates killed my family, Sheriff. They burned down my house with my wife and daughter inside because I was getting too close to their corruption network. Then they had me declared dead so they could claim I was no longer a threat." Rose stared at him. "You've been hunting them for 3 years?" "I've been building a case for 3 years," Cole corrected. "Gathering evidence, following the money trail, documenting their crimes. The Hartwells aren't just mining fraudsters, Rose. They're part of a network that's been stealing federal land grants, embezzling territorial funds, and murdering anyone who gets in their way." Sheriff Bullock was quiet for a moment. "You have proof of this?" Cole reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. "Names, dates, bank records, witness statements from survivors of their other accidents, everything you need to bring them to justice." "Why didn't you come to me with this before?" "Because I needed to be sure you weren't part of it," Cole said bluntly. "Corruption goes deep in these territories, Sheriff. I couldn't take the chance that you were compromised." Sheriff Bullock looked through the papers, his expression growing more serious with each page. "This is extensive. If even half of this is true—" "It's all true," Cole said. "And now they know I'm alive and they know where I am, which means they'll be back and they'll bring help." Rose felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "What kind of help?" "Hired guns," Cole replied grimly. "Men who make the Hartwell brothers look like choir boys. Rose, I need you to understand. Being around me is dangerous. If you want to leave town, I'll give you enough money to start over anywhere you want." Rose was quiet for a long moment, thinking about everything that had happened. The humiliation of the night before seemed like a lifetime ago. In its place was something she'd never expected to feel again: purpose. "I'm not leaving," she said finally. "Rose." "No," she said firmly. "For 3 years I've been hiding from life because of this scar." letting people like the Hartwells make me feel like I'm worth less than nothing. But today, when I was helping those people at the fire, I remembered something I'd forgotten. What's that? I'm stronger than I thought I was, and these people, Dr. Chen, the workers, Martha, the girls at the saloon, they're my community now. I'm not running away and leaving them to face whatever's coming. Cole studied her face. You know they'll target you specifically. They'll know that hurting you will hurt me. Then you'll have to make sure they don't succeed, Rose replied. Sheriff Bullock cleared his throat. Speaking as the law in this town, I could use all the help I can get. Cole, if you're willing to be deputized officially, we can face this together. What about the federal warrant for my death? What warrant? Sheriff Bullock asked with a slight smile. Far as I know, Coleman Blackwood is a concerned citizen who's provided valuable information about criminal activity in my jurisdiction. Cole looked between Rose and the sheriff, and Rose could see him wrestling with the decision. Finally, he nodded. All right, but we do this right. No vigilante justice, no shortcuts. We gather the evidence we need, and we make the charges stick. Agreed, Sheriff Bullock said. But Cole, you need to know. Word is the Hartwells have sent for help from some very dangerous people. A man named Carson Kane and his associates. Rose saw Cole's face go white. Kane is coming here. You know him? Sheriff Bullock asked. Kane is the one who killed my family, Cole said quietly. He's the one who set the fire. That night, as Rose lay in her room above the silver dollar, she found herself staring at the ceiling and thinking about the strange turns her life had taken. 24 hours ago, she'd been a scared saloon girl with no future and no hope. Now she was the floor manager of her own establishment, allied with a man who might be the most dangerous person in the territory, and facing a threat that could destroy everything she'd just begun to build. But for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Rose. Cole's voice was quiet. Can we talk? She opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, looking younger somehow in the lamplight. I wanted to make sure you understood what you're getting into, he said. Kane isn't just a killer, Rose. He's smart, and he's patient, and he enjoys causing pain. When he comes, and he will come, he won't just be trying to kill me. He'll be trying to destroy everything I care about. Including me? Especially you, Cole said quietly, because he'll see that hurting you will hurt me more than anything else he could do. Rose stepped closer to him. Cole, can I ask you something? Anything. When you look at me now, do you still see your wife? Cole was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. When I look at you, I see the future. I see someone worth fighting for, worth building something with. I see someone who makes me want to be better than the man I've been for the last 3 years. Good, Rose said softly. Because when I look at you, I see someone who's given me back my life. And I'm not going to let Carson Kane or anyone else take that away. Cole reached up and gently touched the scar on her face. You're remarkable, Rose McCarthy. So are you, Coleman Blackwood. As they stood there in the hallway, Rose realized that whatever came next, they would face it together, and for the first time since the fire that had changed her life, she believed that might be enough. Outside, the wind carried the scent of smoke and the promise of trouble, but inside the silver dollar, 2 damaged souls had found something worth protecting. The real test would come when Carson Kane arrived to try to take it away. The telegram arrived at dawn, delivered by a nervous boy who wouldn't meet Sheriff Bullock's eyes. The message was brief. Kane arrives today. 3 men with him, hell coming to Deadwood. Cole crumpled the paper in his fist as he stood in the sheriff's office, watching the first light of day creep across the muddy streets. How long do we have? Noon stage, Sheriff Bullock replied, checking his rifle. Maybe sooner if they rode hard from Cheyenne. Rose sat at the deputy's desk, cleaning a small pistol Cole had insisted she learn to use. Her hands were steady, but Cole could see the tension in her shoulders. "What's the plan?" "Same as before," Cole said. "We do this legal. Kane and his men arrive, we arrest them on the outstanding federal warrants, and we let the courts handle justice." "And if they don't want to be arrested?" Rose asked. Cole and Sheriff Bullock exchanged glances. "Then we do what we have to do," Sheriff Bullock said quietly. The morning passed slowly. Cole had positioned himself at the window of the Silver Dollar, where he could watch both ends of the main street. Rose moved between the tables, serving coffee to the handful of brave souls who'd ventured out despite the tension hanging over the town like storm clouds. Martha emerged from the back room, her face pale but determined. "The other girls are safe. Mrs. Rodriguez is hiding them in her cellar until this is over." "What about you?" Rose asked. "You should be with them." "This is my saloon," Martha replied firmly. "Well, Cole's saloon now, but it's been my home for 8 years. I'm not hiding from trash like Carson Kane." At 11:30, Cole spotted the dust cloud on the horizon. "They're coming." By the time the 4 riders reached the edge of town, most of Deadwood had disappeared indoors. Windows were shuttered, doors were barred, and the streets were empty except for a few dogs and the occasional tumble of wind-blown paper. Carson Kane was smaller than Rose had expected, a lean man with grey-streaked hair and the kind of pale eyes that seemed to see everything and feel nothing. His 3 companions were cut from different cloth, large, brutal-looking men with the casual violence of professional killers. They tied their horses outside the hotel and stood in the street, looking around with the confidence of men who'd never met a problem they couldn't solve with bullets. "Coleman Blackwood," Kane called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "I know you're here. Time to finish what we started in California." Cole stepped out of the Silver Dollar, his hands hanging loose at his sides. Sheriff Bullock emerged from his office at the same moment, a shotgun cradled in his arms. "Carson Kane," Cole said conversationally, "you're under arrest for murder, arson, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Kane laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Federal Marshal Coleman Blackwood. Except you're supposed to be dead, aren't you? Makes things complicated." "Not complicated at all," Sheriff Bullock said, walking closer. "You're in my jurisdiction now, and you're under arrest." "Sheriff," Kane said, not taking his eyes off Cole, "you might want to step back. This is between me and the ghost of Blackwood here." "Everything that happens in Deadwood is my business," Sheriff Bullock replied. Kane's smile turned predatory. "Fair enough. Boys?" The 3 men with Kane drew their guns with practiced speed, but Sheriff Bullock was ready. His shotgun boomed once, twice, and 2 of Kane's men went down. The 3rd man's shot went wide as Cole's bullet took him in the chest. Kane himself had his gun out and pointed at Cole, but he hadn't fired yet. "Interesting," Kane said calmly, as if the death of his companions was merely a mild inconvenience. "You've gotten faster since California." "You've gotten older," Cole replied. "True enough." Kane's eyes flicked toward the Silver Dollar, where Rose stood in the doorway. "That your woman in there? The scarred one?" Cole's jaw tightened. "Leave her out of this." "Oh, but she's already in it, isn't she?" Kane's smile widened. "Funny how you seem to attract damaged goods, Blackwood. First that Chinese girl you married. What was her name? Sarah? And now this one. Got a thing for broken dolls, do you?" "Sarah wasn't Chinese," Cole said quietly. "No, my mistake. Hard to tell when their faces are all burned up." Kane's voice turned mocking. "Did this one beg you to save her too? Did she tell you about how the fire felt?" Rose stepped out of the saloon, her small pistol held steady in both hands. "Why don't you ask me yourself?" Kane turned his attention to her, and Rose felt the full weight of his malevolent gaze. "Well, well, brave little thing, aren't you? Tell me, sweetheart, how did you get that pretty scar?" "House fire," Rose said simply. "My family died." "Ah, a kindred spirit. And now you've found another protector. How sweet." Kane's voice turned cold. "Tell me, does he wake up screaming at night? Does he call out for his dead wife when he thinks you're asleep?" Rose kept her gun trained on Kane. "What he does is his business. What you're going to do is surrender or die." Kane laughed again. "You know, I like you. You've got spine. It's going to be a shame when I burn down your little saloon with you inside it." "That's not going to happen," Cole said. "No. Why? Because you're going to stop me. You couldn't stop me before, Blackwood. You were too slow, too soft, too concerned with following the rules. I killed your wife and daughter while you were off filing paperwork like a good little federal marshal." Cole's hand moved to his gun, but Kane was faster. The shot echoed through the empty street, and Rose screamed as Cole staggered backward, blood spreading across his shirt. "Cole." Rose fired without thinking, her bullet catching Kane in the shoulder and spinning him around. Kane kept his feet, his gun swinging toward Rose. "Little hellcat, you'll pay for that." But before he could fire, another shot rang out. Kane jerked, looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then looked up to see Cole still standing, his smoking gun in his hand. "How?" Kane gasped. Cole touched his chest where the bullet had struck, and Rose could see the glint of metal beneath his torn shirt. Body armor. Something new they're making back east. Figured it might come in handy. Kane dropped to his knees, his gun falling from nerveless fingers. This isn't how it ends." "Yes," Cole said quietly, "it is." Kane fell forward into the mud, and the street fell silent except for the wind. Sheriff Bullock lowered his shotgun and surveyed the carnage. "Well, that's that, I suppose." Rose ran to Cole, her hands shaking as she checked him for wounds. "Are you hurt?" "Bruised," Cole admitted, wincing as she touched his chest. "That armor stops bullets, but it doesn't make them comfortable." "Is it over?" Rose asked. Cole looked down at Kane's body, then at the federal arrest warrants Sheriff Bullock was pulling from his pocket. "Yeah," he said finally, "it's over." 3 weeks later, Rose stood behind the bar of the Silver Dollar, watching Cole direct the hanging of a new sign above the entrance. The saloon had been transformed, cleaned, renovated, and turned into something approaching respectable. They still served drinks and provided entertainment, but the atmosphere was different now, safer, more welcoming. "What do you think?" Cole asked, stepping back to admire their work. The new sign read, "The Second Chance Saloon." Below it, in smaller letters, "Proprietors C. Blackwood and R. McCarthy." "I think it's perfect," Rose said, smiling. The federal investigation had cleared Cole of all wrongdoing and officially reinstated him as a U.S. Marshal, though he declined to return to active duty. The evidence he'd gathered had led to the arrest of dozens of corrupt officials and the recovery of hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen funds. More importantly, at least to Rose, Cole had decided to stay in Deadwood. "Rose," he said, walking to the bar where she stood, "there's something I want to ask you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Rose's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "I know we're already married," Cole said, his voice uncertain for the first time since she'd known him. "But that was legal paperwork. This would be personal, real, if you want it to be." Rose looked at the ring, then at Cole's face. "Are you asking me to marry you again?" "I'm asking if you'd like to choose to marry me this time. No coercion, no threats, no desperation, just—" Rose thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The humiliation that had started it all, the fear, the violence, the gradual building of trust and affection, and something deeper. "Coleman Blackwood," she said softly, "are you proposing to me?" "Rose McCarthy," he replied, dropping to one knee right there in the middle of their saloon. "Will you marry me?" Around them, the afternoon customers, miners and shopkeepers, and ordinary people living ordinary lives broke into applause. Martha wiped tears from her eyes. Dr. Chen, who'd become a regular customer since the fire, raised his glass in a toast. "Yes," Rose said, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, I'll marry you." As Cole slipped the ring onto her finger, Rose realized that the scar on her face no longer felt like a mark of shame. It felt like proof that she'd survived, that she'd endured, that she'd been strong enough to build something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. 6 months later, Rose stood in the small church at the edge of Deadwood, wearing a white dress that Cole had ordered from San Francisco. Her scar was visible. She'd chosen not to cover it with a veil, and she felt beautiful anyway. The church was packed with people who'd become their community: Martha and the girls from the Saloon, Dr. Chen and the workers from the Chinese camp, Sheriff Bullock and his wife, dozens of miners and shopkeepers, and ordinary folks who'd found a home in the Second Chance Saloon. As Cole took her hand and they spoke their vows, real vows this time, chosen freely and spoken with love, Rose thought about the girl who'd been so ashamed of her appearance that she'd let herself be trapped by Victoria's threats. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her own worth, who'd chosen her own fate, who'd found love not in spite of her scars, but because of the strength they represented. "You may kiss the bride," the minister announced. Cole lifted Rose's chin gently, his thumb tracing the line of her scar with infinite tenderness. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said softly. "Mr. Blackwood," she replied. And when he kissed her, Rose felt like she was finally truly home. Outside the church, Deadwood sprawled under the Dakota sky, rough, dangerous, full of desperate people chasing impossible dreams. But inside the Second Chance Saloon, two souls who'd been broken by the world had found a way to heal each other. And sometimes, in a place like Deadwood, that was enough to build a future on.